When Keith would get off the road, did he come back here?
Oh, sure, as soon as he could get home.
And tell him what he would always do. He would always go to her bed. It did not matter if it was 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and pinch her toe. I took him home with me one time when he was 12 years old. The first time he'd ever spent the night. But he didn't spend the night. I brought him home at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Did he pinch her toe?
Well, I don't know about that. I was too sleepy. I had to drive back home.
Didn't you take him his first trip to the Buddy Starcher show in Charleston when he was 8?
I had been living away and missed out on a lot of his talent that he was doing at the schools and things like that. And I moved back to Ashland, and I heard all these things he was doing. So I was a big fan of the Buddy Starcher show, so I wrote him a letter and told him I had this little brother and that I thought he was great, and would they let him come in for an interview. So they wrote back and told me what day to bring him, so I took him up, and we didn't have any money, so we spent the night with my girlfriend in Charleston, and we got out and played ball till about 9 o'clock. Keith lost his voice, so we didn't know what to do. We got up at 6 and started pouring hot coffee down him, and went on to the show, and they were so impressed that they booked him for the next week to come back.
What did he sing?
Miller's Cave was one of them, and
it was a Hank Williams song, You Win Again, and another song, I've enjoyed as much of this as I can stand. And we have those on tape, by the way. Yes.
But the guitar he took was the big old K, and he could barely reach over it. And they teased him about little man and big guitar.
My wife's father knew that that was going to be on TV, so he had an old reel-to-reel tape recorder, and he taped it. And that was where RCA got the song for his album Kentucky Bluebird, was from those old radio and TV tapes. There's an old theater up in Sandy Hook that they used to show movies, and they closed it down. And I did a lot of concerts in that theater, and that was where Keith won his first talent contest when he was, what, Mom, 4 or 5 years old?
4 or 5, and I was afraid he wouldn't get up and sing.
The song that he sang first was an old Marty Robbins song called Big Iron on His Hip. And Keith walked out in his black cowboy pants and shirt and a hat and 2 big guns on his side. And he sang the song, and he got a big response. And they asked him to do another song, and so he unbuckled his gun belt and just let the guns drop, and you could hear that echo across the building, that wooden floor. And he took his hat off and threw it down, and then sang the old George Jones song, I'm a Wandering Soul. And he just brought the house down. Of course, he won first place. He was never shy. He loved to perform in front of people. That was he loved that more than anything. And one of the judges in that contest was a guy by the name of Paul Mullins, who was a radio disc jockey. And he told my father, he said, get that boy a guitar. He needs to learn to play. So Dad did the next week. He sent and ordered him a new guitar. And
Alden's catalog.
Of course, Mom gave him his first lesson.
When Mom and Dad took him back, they got on one way, the wrong way.
That was when we went to the Buddy Starcher show, and I said, well, what's wrong? What's everybody coming this way for?
And they're waving at us.
They're waving at us. And my husband said, we're going the wrong way. So he backed up, and they stopped, the policeman did, and he was so nice, and he said, follow me and let me get you to the studio. So we followed him.
Keith met Ricky at a show we were doing in Eazell, Kentucky at the high school. And Ricky entered the fiddling contest that night. And him and Keith really hit it off. They liked the same type of music. So Ricky came, joined our band, and played on the radio shows with us. And in Fort Gay, West Virginia, Ralph Stanley was appearing there one night, and Ricky's father took Keith and Ricky to see Ralph. And Ralph was late, so Keith and Ricky got on stage and were doing some songs when Ralph came in and heard them. And he was really impressed because they sounded like the young Stanley brothers. And he asked them to do the show with him. And from that time on, anytime he was in the area, they would do a show with him. And then when school was out that year, they went on the road with him. And that year, they recorded their first album, and the tribute. After school was out that year, Keith was, I believe, 14 or 15 when he started with Ralph. they toured full time. And Ralph did a lot of recording through those years. Cry from the Cross was a real popular album that they did. But he wanted Ricky and Keith to have their own album. So, his band backed them up, and they did the first album, The Tribute. And then about a year and a half later, on another label, they did the Second Generation Bluegrass and had some of their own original songs on it, along with the old Stanley brothers. He was with Ralph the first time for 3 years, and he left and started playing with his own group, the Country Store and the New Tradition. And he played in around Washington, D.C., and for about a year and a half. And during that time, Ralph's lead singer was killed. And when Keith attended the funeral, Ralph asked him to come back and work as the lead singer and frontman with the band, alongside Ralph. Of course, Keith couldn't turn him down. And that was in 74, 75, and he stayed with Ralph then until 78. He left Ralph and joined the J.D. Crowe Band. And that was the time that Ricky Skaggs went with Emmylou Harris. And she had asked both of them to join her band. Of course, Keith had already committed to J.D., and they had a lot of shows booked that year. So, he wouldn't leave J.D., without a frontman. So he stayed with him until his move to Nashville in '82. The last album they did, J.D. knew that Keith's heart was in country, and he recorded an album that was mainly country. There was only a couple of songs on the album that had any banjo work in it. And the name of that album was called Somewhere Between. And that really was the breakthrough for Keith, because it got a lot of attention in Nashville. And that's what opened the doors for him. And that's when he made his move to Nashville, was '82. I really think Don Light was his manager at that time. He had signed with him. And I think Don Light knew Nora Wilson and some others. This was before Jack McFadden. I think they kind of opened the doors for RCA. He did some demo songs in Nashville, and the first 4 that he did, one of them was Does Fort Worth Ever Cross Your Mind? And he was so proud of that song when he brought it home, but he had not signed with a label at this time. And another one was Honky Tonk Crazy, which is on my album. And they thought it was too country at that time. They were looking for a more up-tempo, softer type country. But George Strait heard Keith's version of Fort Worth, and of course he recorded it, and everybody knows what happened there. It was #1 song and #1 album. And it really kind of bothered Keith that he didn't get to record it because he loved the song so much. And that's one reason I wanted to do Honky Tonk Crazy. It's an old Harlan Howard song, real good song, real country, and really suited Keith, but he never got to do it. Well, the first thing he did was what was called a mini album. It had 6 cuts on it, and it was called A Hard Act to Follow. When he brought that tape home, and he was so excited about that. I mean, he was really into it. He wanted us to hear every word, and he made sure that everybody concentrated and listened to every word. And it was really great. I loved it. It didn't get, it wasn't as popular as I thought it should have been. Because, like I said, the label thought that it was too country. A lot of people criticized him for being too country, sounding too much like Merle or Lefty. And now, that's the real popular thing to do. A lot of people are trying to sound like Keith.